Hey guys, Richard Holder here, and welcome to the channel. Let's say you're headed down to the junkyard to find a motor to swap into your swap project. What would you rather have, a supercharged 3800 V6 or a naturally aspirated or turbo 4.8 liter V8? Let's find out. In this video, we're going to find out if there's a case to be made for choosing a supercharged 3800 V6 compared to a naturally aspirated 4.8 liter V8. We're going to compare them stock to stock, mod versus mod, even more mods versus mods, and then ultimately a turbo versus a turbo. That's right, I said a turbo on top of the supercharged motor compared to just a turbo on the V8. Which one wins? Let's find out. So you might be asking yourself, why would you consider doing a supercharged V6 as compared to just doing a V8? Well, in a lot of applications, sometimes fitment, a V6 is probably easier to fit in some applications if you're putting in a little S10 or something. And I know V8 swaps are very common in those, but I wanted to compare these and show you that the little supercharged V6, which you can find everywhere in the wrecking yard, has good power potential, and it's a good option actually compared to putting a little V8 in. So we're going to take a look at a comparison between the 3800 supercharged V6 and a 4.8 liter V8, which would be a very common deal. So this is our stock 3800. This is an L67, so it is the earlier version and not the upgraded version. We're going to talk about that in a minute. This was run on the engine dyno. We had full accessories on it. We did have not long tube headers, but tubular headers, and they showed no power gain over the stock exhaust manifolds. But it was run with the stock pulley and stock blower, stock throttle body, all of that stuff, basically in stock trim. We were running this on E85, and we obviously had an optimized tune. This thing was making about 8 pounds of boost on our L67, and so equipped, this thing made 295 horsepower and 304 foot-pounds of torque. So now let's take a look and see how this compares to a stock Junkyard 4.8 liter, because I've run a whole bunch of those. And here's one of those. And you can see the little V8 actually does a little bit better. I mean, it's up to 333 horsepower and 343 foot-pounds of torque. So it looks like there's not much of a comparison there, stock for stock. But there are some important things we need to note. One, we were running all of the accessories on the V6 and not on the V8. On the LS, we ran a Mazir electric water pump and no accessories on. So there's going to be a little bit of power there. And also this L67 is not the later L32, which is rated at 20 horsepower better than the L67, because the L32 has a much better supercharger, has the Gen 5 blower, it has a bigger throttle body, it has a better intake manifold. So it might be, theoretically, if we believe what if we believe the factory power numbers, it might be 20 horsepower up on this, which would bring this thing a lot closer in terms of stock for stock kind of power, comparing the V6 to the V8. But let's find out what happens when we modify these and how well they respond to those mods. Now that we've compared the 3800 supercharged L67 to the 4.8 liter in basically stock trim, let's find out when we modify them. We'll take a look at the two most popular modifications for these things, and one of them is to add boost to our 3800 since it already has factory force induction. Raising the boost is very common, and with an LS, far and away the most popular upgrade for those is going to be to add a camshaft. So we'll do both of that, and then don't worry, we're going to put an even bigger camshaft in the LS and then add a camshaft to the 3800 and show you what we do there, but that comes next. So let's take a look and see what happened when we added boost basically to the 3800. And as a reminder, here's what happened when we were running at stock. And you can see adding boost to this thing, we went from 295 to 352 horsepower. Torque went from 303 up to 370. And what we did to get this gain, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the original run, what we did to bring the power up over 350 horsepower was we added the late model Gen 5 blower and intake manifold, and then we put a small pulley on it. We went from the 3.8 inch pulley down to a 3.2 inch pulley. And again, very common for 3800 stuff guys to put pulleys on there. And then if we would have started with an L32, this is the blower that we would have had. So it's probably a little bit more representative. But here's what happened when we, as a comparison to the crane or to the camshaft on our 4.8 liter. You can see we installed the camshaft in our 4.8 liter, and it's making a little bit more power than the supercharged deal with more boost. It made 372 horsepower, peak torque although peak torque was 365 foot-pounds, and you can see below 4,500, the 4.8 liter is making a little less power. And as a reference, I'll go ahead and show you, here's what the 4.8 liter was making with the stock cam. You can kind of see the gain. So it went from 331 or 2 horsepower up to 372. So we gained about 40 horsepower. This was a fairly mild cam. I'll go ahead and put the specs up here to give you an idea. This was a small crane cam. It was a 500 lift, 206, 214 degree duration, and 114 degree lobe separation angle. And don't worry, we're going to put a bigger camshaft in this, and there's a lot more power potential. But this was kind of a small, truck style cam for a 4.8. A lot of times you don't want to go too big on the 4.8 liter, but this gives you an idea of the kind of simple gains that you would get going from a cam upgrade on the 4.8 liter, which has a good power curve. But the blower thing on the 3800s is actually starting to show some gains, because more boost is going to add gains basically everywhere. And as we showed, down low, especially at 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 RPM, as we start putting cams in the V8, we're actually going to start losing power there. But when we added boost on the 3800, obviously we gained it. Now let's take a look at what happened when we put a bigger camshaft in the 4.8 and also a camshaft in the 3800. Because not everybody puts a mild camshaft in their 4.8 liter, let's see what happens when we step up in cam size to the 4.8 liter and then step up with a cam for our 3800. So this is our 3800 V6 with the supercharger on there. It has the Gen 5 M90 supercharger on there. We stepped up to a comp cam, and I'll go ahead and tell you what the specs are on that cam. It's pretty small. It was a 510 lift, 210 to 20 degree duration at 50 and 115 degree lobe separation angle. We also on this one stepped up from the 3.2 inch blower pulley stepped down to a 3-inch blower pulley. And that pushed our peak power up to 405 horsepower, 404 horsepower. Pushed peak torque up to 390 foot-pounds. To give you an idea, I'll show you what the change was from those changes, how much we gained. You can see we picked up a lot. We went from 352 all the way up to over 400, and that worked out very well. And here's what happened on our 4.8 when we stepped up in camshaft. So in this case, we put a Summit camshaft in it. And this was from my Sloppy Stage 2 versus the World test. The Summit cam was a 600 lift. It was a 218, 227 degree duration and 112 degree lobe separation angle. And this cam did very well compared to a lot of other Stage 2-ish type cams that were in there. This was a Summit part number 8720 if you guys are interested in it. And it did indeed make more power than the raised boost and cam upgrade that we did on the 3800. It made 416 horsepower. Although in terms of torque production, it was down 370 foot-pounds. And you can see even from, basically 5,500 or 5,600 all the way down, adding boost and adding the camshaft improved the power out dramatically of the 3800. And now for most of the range, it's now making more torque than the 4.8 liter. That's what I talked about, is that when we go up in camshaft on the V8, we are going to be losing low speed power, but because of the boost that's available with the 3800, we're kind of gaining power. Now, obviously, there's going to be a point where we can't run that anymore. We're running too high of a boost level. And the nice thing about putting the cam in the 3800 is the boost level actually came down from the cam, making the motor more efficient. So now what the supercharged combination really needs now is an air-to-water intercooler, or we could put even more camshaft, or we could port the cylinder head. But I know what you're thinking. Yeah, Richard, that one has forced induction. What happens when we add a turbo? Let's take a look at that. Okay, 4.8 liter guys, here's where you guys get your revenge, and that's when we start adding boost to the equation to the V8. And here's what happened. This is a 3800 supercharged motor that we added boost to. And I know you're thinking, Richard, it already has boost. Well, we added boost on top of boost because we took the supercharged version of the motor and then added a turbo to that. That's right, we did a compound turbo. Now, unfortunately, this is not the same as the previous test that we ran. This was not run with the Gen 5 blower and the upgraded pulley and the camshaft. This was actually just run with another motor that had the supercharger on it with the stock pulley on it, and it had a stock camshaft in it. But this was the only turbo version I have right now of the 3800. So we did a compound boost on a basically otherwise stock supercharged motor with a stock blower and stock pulley on it, because we were trying to get most of the power from the turbo, and we didn't turn it up a lot, although the boost was fairly high because of the compounding. We ran about 7 pounds from the turbo into the blower and ended up somewhere in the 20-pound range or so. But this thing made, the compound version, I'll show you a photo up here so you guys can take a look at it, made 480 horsepower and 465 foot-pounds. Now again, if we were to run this compound deal, or just basically take the blower off and run a cammed ported head kind of version of the 3800, we certainly could get a lot more power. But again, the LS guys need to win this thing, so here's what you have here. Here's what happened when we ran boost on our 4.8 liter, and obviously we've run 4-digit power levels with 4.8 liters of this boost, so it's an endless amount. But here's what you can kind of expect from a typical small cam springs 408 stock heads truck manifold, and we ran the very famous GT45 turbo on here. And here's what happened: 690 horsepower. And 653 horsepower. So again, it's very easy to make lots of power with a cam LS, and you don't even have to pick a 4.8. You could pick a 5.3 or a 6.0 and it makes more power. But I just kind of wanted to show that there's an argument to be made for the little supercharged V6, especially if you're putting in a lightweight version. There's lots of them in the wrecking yard. And if you are going to go turbo, I don't think I would do a compound like we did here. And if I was, I would definitely do something with a camshaft in it. If I was going to do a turbo version, I'd do an NA version of the 3800 with a cam and springs and boost, just like we did on the 4.8 liter. But on the bigger motor, you can make more power. Let's get to our conclusion. Okay, guys, it really should come as no surprise that the bigger motor with boost, a turbocharged Junkyard LS with a camshaft in it, ultimately can make more power. I mean, we've gone way into the 4-digit power range. So if that's what you're looking for, that's definitely the choice. What really surprised me is how well the little 3800 V6 did, kind of at the lower power and the lower boost levels, with the modifications that most of us do. I mean, most guys with a 4.8 liter are really just going to put a cam and springs in it, and away they go. Ultimately, later on, they're probably going to add a turbo, and it's going to work very well. So this really isn't for those guys. I mean, if you're going to choose big power, definitely go with the bigger motor and boost. But what surprised me, as I mentioned, the 3800 V6 at the lower power levels. So if you have an application where you have limited amount of room, maybe you already have a 3800, there's a bajillion of them in the wrecking yard, it actually performs very well. And we haven't even started in on what happens when we don't use the blower. Now we can run ported heads, we can run a bigger cam, we can run an NA intake manifold, and then just add a turbo, because the turbo for the 4.8 liter will also work, like that GT45, will also work on the 3800, but that's another video for another day. I'm Richard Holder. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. More videos, more testing coming up.